Welcome to the ninth Seqeul in the Church of Uganda at 150 videos and audios. Today, we are addressing one of the strategies the missionaries used to defeat Katikkiro Mukasa and the sorcerers by eliminating or avoiding some of the Luganda words that were so much embedded in sorcery. And so we are going to have a look at a long range of words in Swahili in this particular audio, to understand why did Swahili invade our Luganda? Why did Swahili take over our Luganda in some of the words? And therefore, welcome. I'll start today with a word the Swahili used for Jesus Christ. Isa, that was Jesus. Messiah was for the Christ. So the name became Isa Messiah. And for a very, very long time, this is how the Baganda called Jesus Christ. If I'm not wrong, it was not until the 1950s, yes, the other day, that we got rid of Isa Messiah Bibles, and they were succeeded by Bibles of Luganda, which now describe Jesus Christ's name as Yesu Kristo. So Isa Messiah was actually, Swahili is a concoction or a mixture of Arab and African dialects. This happened long ago. It has a history of its own. So I'll just say that we borrowed from the Swahili, and Isa Messiah therefore was not Luganda, was from the coast. Then the place for worship for the Baganda was called Esabo. But can you imagine Makai saying that Abange mujje tugende mu ssabo tusinze Katonda waffe? It became a little bit difficult, like, come on, please come, let us go and worship in Esabo and worship our God. Can you imagine what a mess it would have been? So the missionaries said, no. The sorcerers, let them associate the place of worship with Esabo. But for us, the direct translation, if there is none in Luganda, let us go for the Swahili word, and that's where the word kanisa came from. It's a Swahili word, place of worship, kanisa. It's Swahili, and that way Esabo was got rid of. And maybe here I can also mention the word okusamirira, to pray. The correct word is okusamirira lubali, to pray the semi-god of the Baganda, or to go into intercession. Again, okusamirira could not be used by the Baganda in reference to the Almighty God. We had to find another word. And so when the missionaries asked, how do you ask for something that it's okusaba, and they decided to go with the normal general okusaba, rather than intercession to the semi-god, okusamirira. You see, avoiding all those words that are related to the Katikkiro Mukasa's world of sorcerers. So ours became okusaba, which was more of Luganda, not Swahili. Then the third word I want to address is the Creator. The truth of the matter is, if to the Baganda the Creator was Tonda, then the equivalent should have also have been Tonda. But again, no. It was too close to the sorcerer world. And then they came to a compromise, because for the Baswahili it was Mungu wa mbinguni, God of the heavens, Mungu. And it so happened that in Tanzania, the Swahili sorcerers had also identified the Creator as their Mungu. And the Baganda, therefore, again, were very uncomfortable with the Swahili Mungu. And they concentrated with their Tonda because the difference was so little. If the Tonda was also the creator of everything in the Bible, and here the Baganda have the Tonda, then it means the Baganda, like the Greeks, also believed in a creator. And that creator remains only God, the Tonda, although the Tonda they understood was a little bit different from the Tonda that the Bible was introducing, but it was still the Tonda, so they just added Ka, but the Tonda remained. So the Baganda for the word for God became or remained Tonda, but added the word Ka, To, and it became Katonda. Then we reach the angels. Remember the Baganda, the angels are Amaembe. As we saw yesterday, the angels are, or the messengers, the semi-god messengers are Maembe. But these Maembe also have site or shrine soldiers, emisambwa. Now, you want to use a Maembe in the Bible, and so ejembe lya Michael neritumwa ligende lirwane ne Sitani. Awo ejembe Gabrieli nerigende eri Mariamu. Banange. All that was still deeply rooted in sorcery. We had to come out of there. So the missionaries went for Swahili. The Swahili had the word malaika for angel, and the Baganda borrowed it, and the Swahili took over. So we now call it Malaika Michael, Malaika Gabrieli. It is much sweeter. It is a little bit foreign than okugamba nti ejembe Michael oba ejembe Gabrieli. It was a little bit heavy to the Baganda and the missionaries. Then we go for words like a book. The Baganda never used to write books. The Baganda's history is all oral. It is transmitted from one generation to the other through the evening gatherings at the fireplace where the ancestor would tell the stories. It became a tradition. So that's how history moved for almost 2,000 years. You can trace Buganda history all that long, the Bawawa generation, Bachwezi, and all those generations of the first movements of the Bantu people into Africa and Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. You can trace all that by simply going back to the oral stories told at the evening gatherings. So that's how history was grown in the African setting or in the Buganda setting. So this thing of a book was new, and therefore it was easy to borrow. And the Baganda therefore borrowed from Swahili. The book became Kitabu. All we did was to a little bit change the pronunciation as a Kitabu. Otherwise, the word is Kitabu in Swahili. And then we go to the Gospel. Again, the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke. The Baswahili called it Injili. And we also simply borrow the word and say Injili. The pronunciation simply changes and a little bit of spelling there, but the word is borrowed. Injili was Swahili for the gospel. I told you earlier in the earlier Sequels, the first Christians in 1844, around 1840s, were at the coast Frere town. So the development of Christian words into the Swahili was therefore a little bit older than when the missionaries to Uganda came. Then there is, for example, a sodia, and the Swahili used to call a sodia an askari. You see how the Baganda simply transformed the word into omuseri kare, but it all remains Swahili. Askari, that is a sodia. Although you realize the Baganda had their own word for a sodia, that was omumboa. However, later on it appeared that there was a distinction. Mumboa is more of traditional soldiers, but these colonial soldiers, the administrators' soldiers, then they took the word askari. So that was the distinction. If you say omuseri kare, that would mean an askari for the foreign rulers or the strangers. Omumboa remained the word for the Baganda soldier. Then there was the later. Long ago, the Baganda would send messengers running. For example, as we shall see most likely in the Sequels tomorrow or the other day, we are going to see how messengers were used to bring the message that Huntington has arrived in the East. So messengers would run and they would use shortcuts and they would be very fast. And that's how we delivered our messages. But here, the Swahili bring the concept of a written later. 1844, that's when the first Arabs arrived. And the word came, barua. So the word barua is Swahili. Yeah. And the story goes on. Tea, they call it chai, therefore we also say chai. The half caste for a Swahili is a chotara, we also say bachotara. The Swahili would say chupa for a bottle, the Baganda also borrowed the word chupa. The Swahili will call the empty tin or a can a debe, we also call it a debe. The Swahili will call religion a dini, and we borrowed the word a dini. The Swahili will call it a duka for a shop, and we also borrowed the word a duka. The Swahili will call a horse a farasi, and we also borrowed the Swahili a farasi. Antagonism is known by the Swahili as fitina. Before you know it, you hear the Baganda say, we are in a fitina, meaning that we borrowed the word. This sackcloth, the Swahili call it a gunia, and before you know it, the Baganda are also calling it a kutia. Then the tool, one of the tools which they wear, these sorcerers, a prayer bead. The Swahili used to call it hirizi. Before you know it, the Baganda borrowed the word, they now call it hirizi. The day before yesterday, the Swahili call it juicy. The Baganda borrowed the word, they also say a juicy, a borrowing from the Swahili. The Swahili coffee is known as kahawa. The Baganda borrowed the word kawa. The pencil or pen to write, the Swahili call it kalamu. The Baganda borrowed the word karamu. A matchbox by the Swahili is called kibereti. The Baganda borrowed the word chibiriti. If you must do something, the Swahili will say iyo ni lazima. The Baganda also borrowed the word. You hear them saying lazima, nange lazima. So another borrowing. Somebody who is a very poor man or a very poor woman is a beggar. The Swahili call them maskini. The Baganda also they borrowed the word masikini. The Swahili will call rice muchele. The Baganda also call it muchele. Then the Swahili will call a table meza. The Baganda also call it a meza. The weighing scale is called by the Swahili a mizani. The Baganda also borrowed the word mizani. The Baganda will also call a cross musalaba. The Baganda borrowed the word musalaba. The Swahili will call salary, payment, reward for somebody's energy as mushahara. The Baganda also borrowed the word musara. The Swahili will call a mosque muskiti. The Baganda borrowed the word muzigiti. As a matter of fact, it was muzingiti during those 10 years of Christianity. They used to call it muzingiti, but later on it became muzikiti. The Bazungu, where there is a word for the Swahili referring to a European, we also borrowed the word muzungu. A prophet would be called by the Swahili a nabi, and we also borrowed the word nabi. An alphabet, the Swahili will call it nukta. The Baganda borrowed the word nyukuta. The Swahili will call a drum or barrel pipa. The Baganda could borrow the word pipa. To get permission, the Swahili will say get ruhusa. The Baganda also borrowed the word rukusa. The Swahili will call soap sabuni. The Baganda borrowed the word sabuni. To sacrifice, the Swahili will call it sadaka. The Baganda borrowed the word sadaka. A dish or a plate, the Swahili will call it sahani. The Baganda borrowed the word soani. A suitcase or a box, the Swahili will call it a sanduku. The Baganda borrowed the word sanduko. The wire fence, the Swahili will call it sengenge. The Baganda borrowed the word sengenge. Bed sheets, the Swahili will call it shuka, but the Baganda borrowed the word suka. A cigarette, the Swahili will call it sigara. The Baganda borrowed the word sigara. A very big feast like Christmas Day, a feast day, a very, very big day would be sikuku kwa Kiswahili. The Baganda borrowed the word sekukuru for Christmas, that is. A telephone, the Swahili will call it simu. The Baganda borrowed the word simu. A tray, the Swahili will call it a sinia. The Baganda borrowed the word orusania. A cooking pot, a metal cooking pot, the Swahili will call it a sufuria. The Baganda borrowed the word sefuria. Sugar, the Swahili called it sukari. The Baganda borrowed the word sukari. A chapter, for example, in the Bible and in the Quran, it's called surah. So the Baganda borrowed the word surah. The Baganda's trouser is known as suruali in Swahili. The Baganda borrowed the word empale. Ndoze ekyo tetwakyewola twasigala tugiyita mpale, bo bali bagiyita siruwali, fe tugiyita empale. Ettala, the Swahili would call it taa, fe tugiyita ttaala. It's a borrowing. A brick for building, the Swahili will call it tofali. Naffe we borrowed the word tofali. A carpentry board, the Swahili will call it ubao, and we borrowed the word urubao. And the whole of Europe, the Swahili call it ulaya, and the Baganda borrowed the word bulaya. And the story goes on and on and on. Why are we doing this, or why do we do this? To defeat some of the words associated with sorcery and come up with a unique Luganda associated with Christianity. Did we win? Did Christianity win? The answer is yes, because even up to today, the words they borrowed from Swahili are now owned by us, and we would comfortably say that it's Luganda. The 9th Seqeul has been longer, but let me hope we all appreciate what we've learned today. And as we celebrate 150 years of Uganda, Church of Uganda, I please encourage you, whoever has been listening, that don't be the sole beneficiary. Enjoy with others. How will you do that? Subscribe, like, comment, and share. May the good Lord bless us all. Amen.